Welcome to the Mid Week Tease with me, Adelle Onyango, where I share some random and not too random thoughts on things. And in this episode, I want to talk about something that I did not have before, but finally, through intense work, I can say I have now, which is trust in myself, self-trust. And I want you to just start off by answering the question, do you trust yourself? And I mean trust, not do you love yourself? Do you, think you're confident? Do you believe you're capable? Do you trust yourself? Do you trust the decisions you make? Do you trust yourself when something doesn't feel right? Do you trust yourself enough to say no without needing 5 other people to agree that your no is justified? Do you trust yourself enough to make a decision without going into the group chat and asking for everybody else's opinions? And most importantly, do you trust yourself to be okay even when you get it wrong? And so in this episode, I want us to unpack that. I want us to talk about what self-trust actually is and how do we lose it and how do we rebuild it? And at the very end of this episode, I'm going to give you a 7-day self-trust experiment that I really want you to try out. What really helped me with building my self-trust was to practice myself into having it. We're going to get there. So let's first start off with what this thing is. I think sometimes we imagine a person who trusts herself as this woman who just knows. She walks into a room and she just knows what she wants. She makes decisions quickly, immediately, because she just knows. She never ever doubts herself. She never ever regrets anything. She follows her intuition and she just knows somehow things always work out perfectly. That is not self-trust. That is not self-trust. That's like I don't know what that is. But I can tell you for a fact, it is not self-trust. I think that you can trust yourself and you can still be uncertain. You can trust yourself and you can still ask for advice. You can trust yourself and you can still make the wrong decisions. Trust me, I know. You can trust yourself and completely misread someone. You can trust yourself and start something that doesn't quite work out. You can trust yourself and change your mind. You know, self-trust isn't, I know I'm going to get this right. I feel like the energy it carries is whatever happens, I trust myself to respond. I trust myself to notice. I trust myself to adjust. I trust myself to leave if I need to leave. That part. I trust myself to ask for help if I need help. I trust myself to admit when I got something wrong. I trust myself to recover. The one that I really love is that I trust myself to listen to my body, because I think the body also speaks to you, and you must listen and you must trust it. And I think the distinction between the two things is really important, because a lot of us think self-trust requires us to make the right decision. It doesn't. We're human. We're going to get things wrong a lot of times, right? And I was that woman who would go to the group chat, if it was like the group chat with my sisters, the group chat with my friends, and ask for opinions on anything and everything before I made a decision. And looking back, I feel like from maybe age 30, 31 and younger, a lot of decisions weren't fully mine. There were traces of me there, but I had asked so many people that I had diluted my decisions, and a very small percentage of my decisions were mine. And I just was not trusting myself. I wasn't even leaning to my strengths. I mean, now I'm like, I trust myself to handle that because I'm really good at ABCD. Back then it wasn't the case, you know? But I don't think many of us wake up in the morning and just say, you know what? From today henceforth, I'm not gonna trust myself. I think it happens gradually, and I think it happens from when we're much, much younger, to be honest. If you grow up in environments that constantly told you that your feelings were wrong, or maybe you were too sensitive, or you were overreacting, or things are not that serious, you're constantly being questioned why you're crying, you're told you're being dramatic. And if you hear that over and over and over and over, I think the sad thing that starts to happen is that you start to think that what you're experiencing, the emotions that you're feeling, your perspective on things, can't necessarily be trusted. And sometimes it even goes a step further, and you're taught that somebody else knows you better than you know yourself. This happens in families, it happens in religions, it happens in schools, in relationships, in friendships, in workplaces. And I think particularly for women, it's interesting to consider how often we're encouraged to distrust ourselves, right? If a woman is uncomfortable with a situation, she's often told she's overthinking. If a woman is angry, she's told she's emotional. If a woman doesn't like someone, she's asked to give them another chance. If a woman doesn't want to necessarily do something, she's asked to explain why, almost to justify why. And again, over time, we start to believe that our internal experience isn't okay as is. We need external verification and validation. Like, I can't simply feel uncomfortable. I need evidence that I'm allowed to be uncomfortable. And then there's gaslighting, right? So if you've experienced prolonged gaslighting, I'm pretty sure you understand what I'm talking about. Something happens, you remember what happened, you know how it made you feel, and then somebody repeatedly tells you that's not what happened. You're remembering it incorrectly, you're exaggerating, you're twisting things, you're the problem. And at the end of it, you might even start asking yourself, maybe they're right. You know what I mean? Somebody else's interpretation of your experience begins to carry more weight than your own. And this can, in a very heavy way, affect your self-trust. And we know that we experience a lot of gaslighting, be it in families or in friendships, in romantic relationships. This is another thing that erodes our self-trust. Another thing that can erode it is people pleasing. Oh my God, thank God I've recovered from this nonsense. It was so heavy to carry. People pleasing really requires an enormous amount of attention to other people. You're constantly watching other people and checking, like, what do they need? Are they upset? Are they comfortable? Did I offend them? Do they like me? Yeah. Should I say yes? Will saying no disappoint them? What should I do to keep everything okay? And you become so fluent in everybody else's needs, and you're the least fluent in yourself. And outside of people pleasing and gaslighting, sometimes we break our own trust. Because sometimes the loss of self-trust doesn't only come from what other people have done to us. Sometimes it comes from our own experiences. Maybe you knew you were tired, you were exhausted, and you kept pushing. You knew you didn't want to go for that event, and you went anyway. You knew something wasn't working, and you stayed. You promised yourself, the next time this happens, I'm leaving. Then it happened, and you stayed. You told yourself you were going to rest. You didn't. You told yourself you weren't going to answer that call. You answered. And I'm not saying this with any level of shame or judgment. I'm saying it because these tiny moments really do matter. Every time you override yourself, you are teaching yourself what I say to myself doesn't really mean a thing. Think about it like trust in any relationship, right? If someone is constantly promising you something and never follows through, eventually you stop believing them. So what happens when the person constantly making and breaking promises to you is you? Yeah, the trust in yourself gets eroded. And another thing that I think erodes our self-trust is, sometimes you just made a bad decision. Maybe you trusted somebody you shouldn't have. Maybe you took the job and hated it. Maybe you entered the relationship. You made an investment that ended up wrong. And you made all of those decisions and it ended up badly. And instead of saying, I made a decision that didn't work out, you start saying, I can't trust myself to make a decision. These are very two different statements. One is talking about an event, and the other one is talking about identity. Now, if every bad decision becomes evidence that you can't trust yourself, eventually you're going to be terrified of making any decisions and you're going to lean on others, because now you've made it deeper than simply choosing, simply making a decision. Now you're trying to guarantee the outcome, And none of us can do that. None of us is in control. Sometimes we make decisions and it ends badly, and that's all it is, And so now I want to focus on, how do we rebuild self-trust? The first thing I think that matters is keeping small promises to yourself. And I really do mean small. You don't have to begin with some major life-changing promise, right? Keep it small. If you say, I'm leaving this event at 9, leave at 9. If you say, tonight I'm resting, I'm going to be in bed by 9:30, rest, be in bed by 9:30. If you say, I'm not replying to this email or to this message until tomorrow, don't reply. If you say, I'm going for a walk this morning, go for the walk. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you're creating evidence, right? You're saying, when I say something matters to me, I listen. And we really underestimate how powerful this is, because we think these are such small matters, but there are so many small matters in a day that they ultimately make an impact. Self-trust is built in this very small, ordinary moments. Second thing I think you can do is make decisions that nobody else gets to vote on. And you can start with low-stake decisions. What do I want to eat? What do I want to wear? Do I even want to go? Which movie do I want to watch? Where do I want to spend my Saturday? Because if you're used to seeking external validation, making decisions alone can feel very strange, scary, and uncomfortable. And like your default maybe to ask others, what do you think? What would you do? Do you think this is okay? I want you to try occasionally not asking. Just make the decision, make a choice, and then allow your choice to be enough. Third thing I think you can do, stop polling everybody. I'm not saying don't seek advice. I think community matters, wisdom matters, expertise is important. Yeah, sometimes other people genuinely do have information that we don't have. But there's a difference between I need more information and I need someone else to give me permission. I'll give you, as my therapist calls it, self-disclosure. In my last relationship, I remember being on a walk and I was walking alone and I was thinking about buying land. And I was like, yeah, I want to buy land here. But I haven't done enough research. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to do my research, etc. And then I thought, let's say the person I was dating at that point, let's call him John. Immediately I had a voice in my, not a voice, like I had an urge to say, oh, I'm gonna run this by John. And thank heavens for self-awareness, because immediately a voice in my mind shut it down and was like, why? Is John in real estate? Does John sell land? Does John, is John a lawyer? Because you do need a lawyer in these land things. He is none of the above. And when I sat with myself, I was like, oh my God, I was looking for permission, not information. So before you ask your sister, your best friend, your partner, your therapist, TikTok, your mom, the group chat GPT, strangers on Reddit, before you ask them, please start by asking yourself, what do I think? Even write it down. What do I think I should do? What do I actually want? What am I afraid of? And then after you've answered that, then is when you can seek advice. Sometimes you'll find that you don't even need the advice. But if you do find that you need the advice, now you'll be clearer about who to get advice from. You'll be like, actually, I need to talk to a lawyer. Actually, I need to talk to my other friend who just bought land and get their insights on what their process was. You know what I mean? Let your voice enter the room first. Fourth thing I want you to do is to pay attention to your no. Sometimes something in you is saying no. Nah. Z. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go. I don't like this. Something feels off. I need to leave. I need to rest. And now, this doesn't mean that every uncomfortable feeling is intuition, right? Sometimes it's anxiety or fear. Maybe it's an old wound being activated. But instead of immediately overriding the feeling, lead with curiosity, you know? And this I started to do, and I do this very well. I have to say, I do this very well. When I feel a no in my body, before it's even hit my mind, I'm like, where is this coming from? Why don't I want to do this? What am I noticing? You know, is there information that this no is carrying? And I just kind of lead with curiosity and I investigate. Because yes, those feelings may not need automatic obedience, but I also don't think that they need or deserve automatic dismissal. Lean into your nose. Fifth thing I want you to do is allow yourself to change your mind. Oh my God, please. I see evidence of this on social media every day of people denying themselves the valuable gift of allowing yourself to change your mind. You get new information, you can change your mind. This is such a big part of self-trust because sometimes we think changing our minds means we've made the wrong decision. Not necessarily, hey. Maybe you made the best decision you could with the information you had at that time. And then new information arrived, or circumstances changed, or you changed, you know? And so you can say, you know what? I know I agreed to this, but I can't anymore. You know, I thought I wanted to do this, but I don't anymore. You know, I chose this path, but I've realized it's not for me. Changing your mind doesn't automatically make you unreliable. Sometimes it's just evidence that you are actually listening to yourself. So it goes back to building that self-trust. Sixth thing I want you to do is stop using mistakes as evidence against yourself. My God, it feels like sometimes we have this folder in our mind that has all of our mistakes from, as my mom used to say, 19 patopuk, which means like 19 way back when, you know? And that folder is just like handy to help us feel shit about ourselves. And there is a psychologist called Dr. Kristen Neff who has done extensive work around self-compassion. And one of the things I appreciate about self-compassion is that it offers us another way of relating to ourselves when we fail. That 100% came from their work, right? Imagine trying to build trust with somebody who humiliates you every time you get something wrong. Hey, sounds exhausting. You would be terrified of doing anything around them. And sometimes that person who's humiliating us is us. You make a mistake and immediately your mind is just like, see, you're stupid. You always do this. You should have known. This is why you can't trust yourself. Can you imagine if you flip that around and if you make a mistake, ask yourself, that didn't go as planned, but what do I know now that I didn't know then? Or what did this teach me? Or what would I do differently? Because mistakes, I always say this. I say this to my team internally all the time. I say mistakes are data. Everything is data. Mistakes can become information. It's not an ID card of who you are. The seventh thing I want you to do is build a record of when you were right. I really want you to do this one because we have that folder of all our mistakes. Ebu, please, why not make a folder of all the times you were right. You could use your journal. You could use your notes app, whatever. Right. Things I knew. Think about the moments when you listened to yourself and it served you. Maybe you knew you needed to rest. Maybe you knew a friendship had changed and you needed to just leave it. Maybe you knew it was time to leave a job or a relationship. Maybe you knew you needed to take a particular opportunity, make a certain investment. Maybe you followed some curiosity in your life and it changed everything. Maybe everybody else told you not to do something and you did it anyway and you're so glad you did. Build the evidence. Because sometimes we remember every time we got it wrong. And then we are so conveniently forgetful about all the times we successfully got it right. Okay, remember I told you I wanted to leave you with a 7-day self-trust experiment? Here we go. It's not dramatic. It's not something you can't immediately do. But I really think this is going to help you practice trusting yourself, especially when it comes to collecting small pieces of evidence. Okay, so day 1, make a small decision without asking anyone else's opinion. A small decision. Don't write about it in the group chat. Don't ask for anybody else's opinion. You make one small decision on day 1. Day 2. Keep one promise you make to yourself. It can be tiny. It can be what time you're going to go to bed, what you're going to have for lunch, that you're going to sit in the sun for 5 minutes. It could be a tiny promise. Make it and keep it to yourself. Once you've said it, you've got to honor it. Day 3, notice a moment when your body says no. And when it does, don't immediately override it. Pause. Lean on curiosity and ask yourself, what am I feeling? What is this no trying to tell me? Day 4, before asking for advice, write down what you think first. Let your voice exist before anybody else's is allowed in the room. Day 5, give yourself permission to change your mind about something. Day 6, write down 5 times trusting yourself served you well. 5 pieces of evidence. Trust me, they exist. Write them down. And day 7, make one decision that you've been postponing. It doesn't have to be enormous, but make the decision. And then afterwards, pay attention to how it feels to have chosen. And at the end of the 7 days, ask yourself, what did I discover when everybody else's voice got a little quieter? I really hope you end up discovering that you actually know what you want more often than you thought, Or maybe you'll find how quickly you look for reassurance and you can start to unpack why that's the case. Or that, and this was the case for me, realizing that my body has been communicating with me all along. I just was not listening. You might, and this one might be heartbreaking, you might realize that you break promises to yourself more often than you realized. The point isn't to become perfectly self-trusting in 7 days, okay? The point is to start collecting evidence, And slowly over time, if you keep doing this every 7 days, it becomes second nature. And you will start to realize that you are someone you can rely on. I really hope you connected with this episode because I think self-trust, so important, and we don't talk about it enough. And if you did connect with it, share it with someone you love. Thanks for listening to the Mid Week Tease, a Legally Clueless Africa production. Episodes go out every Wednesday, and you can learn more about us by going to legallycluelessafrica.com.